Mate, this week's episode is brought to you by JBL.
What have they got for us this week, mate?
This is the JBL Reflect Mini NC. I've been wearing those at the gym. They're legit as well.
Nice little hook on them.
Mate, charge in this little charger, and they're block out as well, so I didn't notice anyone around me. They're still rolling out our discount.
Yep.
TPATC25 at checkout. Get you 25% off these bad boys and anything else on the site. And thanks to Colonial for sponsoring the podcast as per usual.
Always great sponsors of the podcast.
I was down at Portsea Pub for an event that they held with Julia Stone. There were 800 people there. So it was a big event.
We love Colonial.
We do love Colonial. And thanks for sponsoring the pod and enjoy this episode.
For those of you who may not know,
It's pros and cons time.
Mr. Smith?
Hey, who's that? David Zacka Parker Ruckus.
Wrong.
How the bloody hell do you say that?
Zaharaka!
Pros and cons.
What is going on, everybody?
Daniel, how are you?
Good, mate. What's happening?
Not a lot, mate. I'm excited for another big show. We've had a couple of crackers lately.
Big names. We're not slowing up today.
No, we're not slowing up. Andrew Gaze was great last week, mate.
Rolling the Olympian train, we've got James Magnussen, mate. He
Yes.
is how many?
James
Olympics?
Magnussen, he former Australian swimmer, mate. He competed for the Olympics, Com Games, World Championships, and Pan Pacific Games. So it's a great resume there.
Won some medals.
He's won 17 medals in total, mate. In fact, he's 8 gold medals, 5 silver, and 4 bronze. Including the 2011 and 13 World Championship gold medals.
Yep.
And, mate, just missed out. How much by in 2012?
1/100th of a second. Came
1/100th.
second. Silver medal, 1/100th.
Yeah, that's
Close numbers, those 100 meters.
Yes,
sprints.
you train that long for that. So we'll ask him about that. He's also recorded the 5th fastest 100-meter swim in history, 47.1.
I think he had the fastest at one point as well. I think he was the fastest swimmer in the world at some point in his career. I remember reading in my, real heavy research that I do on this podcast.
We do heavy research here. I've got 3 pages today, so it's getting
noticed.
longer and longer, my research, mate.
noticed.
I had the help of Amy last night, helped me doing some research. So
she's even chaperoned you in today.
She chaperoned
to the
me in.
studio.
Yes,
didn't want to sit in, which I don't blame her either.
No, she didn't want to sit in. I don't know what she's been doing.
Recording our intros.
Yeah,
17 takes of our intro.
Exactly. He's a well-accomplished man, James, and also post-career then he started a business and also went on SAS Australia.
Yeah, he's been in heaps of stuff. I mean, he's still pretty young. He's done so much in his life.
Yes,
and
still only 29.
He's a big lad too, big boy.
You wouldn't mind getting a boxing ring with him, or?
I think he's a different weight class than me.
I think he is, mate.
I think he's still pretty quick in the pool though.
I think he is. Well, I saw a little clip of him doing a segment with Jason PJ on Kiss, and he was quite quick.
Yeah,
so it's very smooth in the pool still.
Well, mate, let's jump straight into it, chat with him, and hope you guys enjoy it. Mate, it's so good to have you on. Thanks for jumping on.
Yeah, no, thanks, boys. Thanks for having me.
Mate, it's we were speaking about swimming earlier when we were just in prep for this, and the amount of dedication that swimming takes, I feel like all sports obviously have their own, difficulties and preparation that you need, but swimming, I feel like it's one of those ones where you start as a kid, you always hear about the early mornings. It's constant, swimming in the 5 a.m. starts in the pool, but then you get all of a sudden to you Com Games, obviously that you competed in the Australian World Champs and all that, but then getting into the Olympics. Did you find that there was all of a sudden this jump and overnight change from being like this guy who's just swimming his whole life, I'm assuming, to then all of a sudden I'm an Olympian?
Yeah, I think in Australia, probably the hardest jump is when you go from a kid or a non-professional swimmer to kind of the big time is the celebrity status that goes with it. Because in Australia, we put our Olympic swimmers up on such a pedestal, that was probably something that you can't train for, you can't prepare for. I'd spent my whole life swimming laps, working out, getting my body in peak physical condition to compete in swimming. But what I wasn't doing was getting my mind ready to be in peak condition to cope with the I guess, struggles and pressures and expectations that come with being a swimmer in Australia. And for me, that sort of, I first represented Australia in swimming when I was 18 years of age. So it was pretty young to be thrust into that spotlight. And it was a huge change, and something I probably struggled with at the front end of my career was dealing with that spotlight and that attention from the general public.
Does Swimming Australia or the AOC or anything provide any help or programs to do any media training or how you cop? Because obviously cop criticism these days on Instagram, Twitter, anything you like. Do they have anything back then, and is it improved a lot now? Because I'm assuming in the 10 years it would have been a massive difference.
Yeah, no, zero. There was nothing back then, as far as I'm aware. There's still nothing now. For me, it was probably an even steeper learning curve in that Facebook and Instagram really took off right when I was kind of at sort of the peak or the start of my career. And so nobody knew how to handle that. Nobody knew not to read comments, not to sit on Instagram the night before a race. There was no sort of guidelines. There was no way that people had done it in the past that had worked really well. And swimming's a weird one, right? Because in say a football team, you're all together pretty much year round, bar a bit of the off season, and you've all got a common goal. You've got that support staff around you 24/7. In swimming, I always swam out of Sydney. There was probably max at any given time 2 or 3 other Olympic swimmers in Sydney, none in my squad for most of that time. So I was kind of had my own small support network, but didn't have much to do with Swimming Australia at all. So they kind of support you when you're there on race day, but outside of that, it's you're left to your own devices most of the time.
I think one thing that surprises me about swimming, and I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on it, is that I feel like it's obviously take out of any of the team-based swimming events that you'd be in, but it's a very individualized sport, but it's still treated as though you need to be a part of this team, especially at the Australian level. It's not that far removed from, like a tennis or boxing or, UFC at that top level where they're so individualized in the way that you have to train and be on your own, and it's just you in there at the end of the day. But there's all this scrutiny on being a team player. How does that vibe with you? And what is the sort of comparisons that you pull there?
Yeah, it's probably the toughest part of the sport, and something that, I struggled with at different times is coming to terms with at sometimes you have to be best mates with the guy, and then at the next step you got to go out in front of the world and, beat him or compete with him. And that's something that's always a really tough thing. Probably one of the things that I found was the hardest to come to terms with in swimming, and if I could compare it to like a UFC or a boxing. So when you're going into a big fight in the UFC or a big boxing match, you've got your team with you. You've got your own nutritionist, your own physio, your own masseuse, your own sports scientist, biomechanist, all these things, and for me personally, at any given time during my career, I probably had up to 10 people in my support staff that would work to get me to my best. And that's what you got to do to be, the top of the world in any sport or any sort of anything you do. So I had this support team of about 10 people who were the best in their field at everything they did. When I went to Olympic Games, I got to take my coach, my swimming coach, and that's it. All those support staff that know me intricately and that have worked to get me to that Olympic Games are suddenly gone. That whole support network's taken away from me. And that's something that I always found puzzling. And then when you get up there and you compete and you kind of take the brunt of the result, you'd like to at least have the people around you that know you, that have worked to get you there, to be there on the day when you compete in the biggest race or competition of your life. So that was something I always found really difficult. And the other really tough thing about swimming in comparison to another team sport is the age differences and the gender differences. So, on any given team, you can have a 34-year-old man with a wife and kids, and you can have a 16-year-old girl who's still at school and, wouldn't even be allowed into a bar. So you go away in a swim team, you try and bond over common interests and, views on things. And it's just a really kind of quite bizarre environment compared to, I played rugby league my whole life until I made the Australian swim team. You go away on a football trip, you even go away for the weekend to an away game, and there's a sense of camaraderie. You're all going there to win the game. You've all got the same interests. You all, have similar friendship groups. You go away in a swim team. On one night, someone wins a race and it's the best thing in the world for them. In that same race, another person loses, so they're distraught. And another person swimming later that night and is super nervous. So you've always got this huge mix of emotions, this huge mix of personalities. And it often makes it quite a juggling act for the team staff to keep things under control.
Tell you what, mate, like you spoke about whether you have a bad race and you kind of cop maybe the brunt of losing. In team sport and football, you kind of don't really mind sometimes if you might lose a game, but the coach cops it for the game plan, or another player cops it for a bad performance, and you just sneak away, and you might have had a reasonable game and you don't cop criticism that week. So it's definitely, like you said, it's different in that team environment where you've got 22 other players or a coach or a GM or a president that can cop the flack that week. You don't cop it. And I couldn't imagine how it would be in an individual sport where you have to, brunt or cop all the criticism like that. But I want to speak about then, you kind of spoke about your early transition from being a young amateur athlete thrust into this world of professionalism and competing at champs and that. And just 2011, when you won the gold medal and became a world champion for the first time, what was that like where you came back to Australia? And again, was it just even more heightened there that you obviously been competing, I think, for a year prior to that? I think you made your first national team in 2010. But obviously you were a world champ all of a sudden, and now it's all of a sudden this heightened expectation on what you can do in the next couple of years of racing.
Yeah, I probably, so after that world champs, my mum and my little brother came over and we spent an extra week over in China just looking around. So I came back separate from the rest of the swim team. And at that age and at that point in my career, I was probably pretty ignorant to what was about to happen as a result of that world title. So when we got back, we flew home, normal flight. I think I got in at like 6 a.m. in the morning back into Sydney, walked up sort of the causeway. And as soon as we came out into the airport, there were cameras, there were photographers, there were journalists, there were people yelling out, asking for autographs. It was kind of like this instant change in my life. And that's when, I can have a definitive before and after that race in my life and the way I was able to live my life. The year previous as an 18-year-old, I could live a reasonably normal life, go out on the weekends, do your normal thing. That following year, post-world title, normality became a very hard thing to maintain. And particularly leading into that Olympic Games, like I just couldn't really go anywhere or do anything because of the recognizability in the general public, but also this weird standard that the public hold our swimmers to, where you can't be seen having a beer or someone will come up to you and say, that's my taxpayer dollars paying for you to go to the Olympics. Even though, it couldn't be further from the truth. Like, it's probably my taxpayer dollars putting your 3 kids through school. But the general public, once you're on the swim team, they seem to have a certain sense of ownership over you. And it just changes like what you're able to do.
Yeah, kind of. I relate that straight away to a week cop. Oh, you might be having a Tuesday night dinner and you were having a red wine and you might post it at dinner and a fan or someone, a member of the footy club, be like, you shouldn't be doing that. You should be training or preparing for your game on the weekend. And it's so bizarre that people think that you're a 24-hour athlete. I mean, you are in terms of like preparation and getting your body right, but you can have a balance of going out, having fun with your friends, and you can't train 24/7 for a sport, for a game, or prepare for a game. So just that unique perspective of what you're saying there is people or fans expect us as athletes to just be training 24/7. And it's just so interesting you're saying that. How did, you kind of answered it there, but how did you cope with just Did you ignore people saying that? Did it change the way you then, did you not go out on weekends, or did you not have dinner leading up to that 2012 Olympics?
Yeah. I pretty much did have to change my lifestyle going into that 2012 Olympics, which I think in the end ended up affecting my performance, because I had that. The one thing that I've always had with swimming, and that has been probably one of my biggest strengths, is that I'm not what you would call a swimming nerd or a swimming historian, in that, I enjoy swimming in the sport itself. I like racing, I like training, but I don't spend a lot of time reading up on stats, watching other races, seeing what other swimmers are doing around the world. One of my biggest strengths was that as soon as I exited the training pool of a day, as soon as I walked out of those doors, I wouldn't think about swimming again. I wouldn't let it affect the rest of my day. I wouldn't go around talking about swimming to my mates or anything like that. I actually often kept separate friendships groups away from swimming, so that was able to be done. What happened in 2012 was that ability to switch off from swimming was kind of taken away from me.
Yep.
Because every time I went to get groceries or got petrol or something, people were stopping, asking for photos, talking about swimming, asking about swimming. I'd turn on the TV and I'd be on the news for swimming. I started getting like paps at the beach and stuff like that. I had probably a dozen sponsors leading into that Olympic Games. So every time I turned on the TV, there was a TV ad of me for something around the Olympics. It just got so exhausting. I couldn't get away from it. I couldn't get out of my own head. So I started to be affected by it mentally, just because it instead of looking forward to and preparing for the Olympics, I started thinking it was like this impending doom, almost like this thing that's coming that I keep getting reminded of. And really, I just wanted to swim, race, switch off, and be a normal person. But, and that was something. After 2012, I learned to deal with that. I learned to cope with it, and I put support mechanisms around me to deal with that. But leading into London, I'd never experienced that before, and nobody kind of in my support team had experienced that sort of reality in the past either.
Yep. Do you think that then once you got to the Olympics and you've flown in and that's all, you're in this now hub, I guess, did that then amplify again, or did you feel like you were away from it all there once you were in it?
Yeah, I think it amplified again, because one of the first things we did when we went into the Olympic Village was a press conference. And I remember sitting in this like auditorium, and it's not just the press of Australia, it's the press of the whole world. And I think there was probably 4 of us in that press conference, maybe, or 3 or 4 of us. It was like me, Eamon Sullivan, Steph Rice, and Liesl Jones, I think, at the time. And you probably got 500 media from around the world in this auditorium. We sat there for about 1 hour, and I was the only person that got asked a question the whole time. I just got peppered this whole time, and I was just sitting there going, "Oh my God, all this focus is on me." Like, I'm sitting next to, Steph and Eamon, who are, superstars in my mind, and everyone was just hammering me and peppering me with questions. And so it was kind of getting exaggerated. And then anytime you went out of the village or on a bus or you're on, making your way to and from the pool, there was just people everywhere screaming and stuff. So heaps of Aussies over in London as well, like living there, expats and stuff like that. So it just kind of got amplified. You just felt like you were living in a zoo where everyone was looking in at you. And again, you just couldn't escape it. So it's a super weird environment in Olympic Village. Like, for all the fun that people talk about in terms of performance, it's probably like the worst environment you can ever have, because like I said, you're like a monkey in a zoo with everybody looking at you 24/7, and there's cameras everywhere. So it's a very different experience to what you'd want.
So how do you then talk us through the prep into the actual main 100-meter race? So, once you start actually having to perform out while all that stuff's going on, talk us through how all that went down and how that, I guess mentally, it sounds like mentally it would have been really tough to break away from that.
Yeah, mentally is the hardest bit. And it was weird. Like, I was swimming really shit leading up to it, like poorly leading up to it, which was like weird for me. I've probably the first time I hadn't been swimming really well in the lead up to a big meet. And, in hindsight now I look back on it and I was like, it's because you were mentally fried. Like you weren't in the right headspace to swim right. But for me at that time, I was just thinking, my body doesn't feel right. I don't feel good in the water. But my performances in the pool in London, in hindsight, I'm actually quite proud of. Reason being the environment that I've explained and the things I've spoken about. And as a 20-year-old kid with, the expectations of 20 million people, I actually swam pretty well on the day. The time I did on the day was fast enough to win any other Olympic Games in history. Yep. I was just in some ways unlucky that another guy had the race of his life that specific day. And at the time I was shattered. I was like, this is a failure. Like for me, it was like gold or nothing. And that's, a way I've approached a lot of things in life. But in hindsight, looking back on it now, I'm like, wow, you kind of, as a 20-year-old guy, dealt with that scenario pretty well, like as well as I could have hoped for, and swam pretty well on the day as well.
Yeah, so you spoke about leading up to it, the year leading up to it, and the pressure you dealt with and not being able to cope with everything. But then you mentioned that post that Olympics, so post losing a race by 1/100th of a second after training for so long to do it, it kind of seems like you actually cope with it quite well. And you spoke about post that Olympics, you put things in place to just be able to mentally prepare better for races and events and meets. And I guess losing potentially, like you said, you're comfortable with you raced the best race you could on that day, and you took it quite well where other people might not. But what were the things that you put in place post that race to then be able to prepare and compete and mentally accept the things that happened and then move on and try new challenges post those Olympic Games?
Yeah, so straight away we kind of sought out a mindset coach. So it was the one thing, I'd spent all this time training my body and looking after my body, but I'd never actually trained or taken care of my mind. So we sought out a mindset coach, not a clinical psychologist, because I tried that before and didn't really like the diagnosis of certain things. Sometimes I felt like people were telling me that I had problems that either A, I hadn't recognized before, so weren't affecting my life, or B, probably just looking to justify the pay packet. So I employed a mindset coach. His name was John Novak, and he worked for the Manly Seagulls in the NRL. So the Manly Seagulls had just come off a run of like 3 or 4 premierships in like a span. They were going toe to toe with the Melbourne Storm at the time. They were the 2 top teams. And one of the big things that they were talking about with their run of success was their mindset and how mentally strong they were, particularly in these big matches. So I started working with this mindset coach, and we spoke about preparation for these events, about dealing with setbacks and that kind of thing. And that became a big weapon for me leading into the World Championships the year following the Olympics, which that World Championships for me was about winning back that world title and solidifying myself as the fastest man in the world.
When things are measured, we talked about, Dave just quickly mentioned the 100th of a second. When we're talking at that crazy minimal, time differences, do you feel in the pool? Do you know the difference? Can you get to the end and go, damn, that was 100th of a second better than last time? Is there any difference in your swim that you know?
Nah, not really. And like a lot of people ask me, like post career, does that 1/100th irk you? Like, is that a pain point for you? And to be honest, it's not really. It's not something that as a swimmer I think about much, because I've won races by 1/100th. I've lost races by 1/100th. It's kind of live by the sword, die by the sword type thing. And we do an event which is such small margins that you kind of get used to it as a swimmer. So for me, like if I had a loss by half a second or 1/100th, it would be the same outcome. But yeah, you don't know when you're swimming like, that was 1/100th faster. You just know you got those days where you're like, yep, I'm on. Yeah, I'm in the zone and nothing can go wrong type thing.
Yeah, and then let's quickly chat about that, because I know that there was such this long period of time where that 47 seconds was not being able to be cracked, and then all of a sudden the super suits came in. For those listening, maybe give us a bit of an explanation of what happened there. and then and how that, I guess, affected the game.
Yeah, so most people will probably remember the suit Thorpe wear. So it sort of came to his wrist and then down to his ankles, and they kind of just kept improving on that, making the material thicker and more buoyant until the point where you got these guys that almost looked like sort of bodybuilders doing the sprint freestyle events in swimming, because they had these suits that kind of floated them up and stopped them from fatiguing too much. And, swimming kind of started... the times were dropping really fast. People were swimming really fast. And then they realized that they'd made a mistake by allowing this to happen, and they banned those swimming suits. The issue was, when they banned those swimming suits, they left the same world records that were swum in those suits. And in terms of men's freestyle events anyway, none of those world records have ever been broken. And it sounds a little bit trivial in some ways, but say for me at the peak of my career, a world record to me would have been worth somewhere between $100,000 and $200,000 based off sponsorships, incentives, and stuff like that. And based off the times I swam, I would have broken the world record probably between 10 and 15 times in my career if those super suits weren't there. So you're talking, $1 to $2 million that probably cost me during my career, which is weird, right? Like, and I don't really think about that much now, but at the time I was like, damn, I should be breaking these world records. Like, I'm smashing the previous best in the world that was set before a suit, but I get no reward or kind of financial benefit from doing that, which was kind of frustrating.
Did you ever swim in those?
No, I never got a chance to swim in them. So they were there when I was in age group swimming. They cost like $1,000 a suit, and you could only wear it once or twice. So my family couldn't afford to be buying me these crazy suits to swim in, age group events.
Did you speak to anyone about like the crazy difference? Did anyone ever speak about the difference they felt in the pool?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was like overnight, you had a guy that was, you had in Australia in particular, you had Eamon Sullivan was unbeatable in a suit. A year later, I was beating him by a second.
That's crazy.
That's like overnight like that. You had guys in France who were these big, jacked bodybuilder-looking dudes breaking world records. The next day, as an 18-year-old, I'm dusting them up in these shorts. So it was like a stark contrast. And literally from one day to the next, the world order changed in swimming. It probably came at a good time for me because I was really young, and so that I hadn't swum in those suits, so the change didn't affect me. I hadn't, put on a lot of muscle bulk to swim faster in these suits. But it just changed the face, particularly of men's sprinting. Sprint events are very unique in themselves, in that you get the most refined athletes because it is the shortest amount of time and everyone wants to do them. But it kind of felt like overnight you went from a Formula One car with a 12-cylinder engine back to a V8, and it just changed the game.
Yeah, right.
So let's. I just want to fast forward to the Commonwealth Games in 2014. You then in Glasgow, you end up winning the 100-meter freestyle. So you had obviously you've come off a World Championships in 2013. You then won a Commonwealth Games in 2014. What was then the build-up like into trying to trial and prepare for Rio? Obviously, then going into a new Olympic Games coming off the back of London.
Yeah, so probably the focus for me firstly was going into that 2015 season, the World Championships. So no one had ever won 3 consecutive world titles in the 100 freestyle. So that was kind of my focus at the time. It was a bit of a weird time for me because say 2014, I was 23-ish years old, and by that stage of my life, I'd won everything there was to win in swimming except an Olympic Games. I'd raced everyone at some point, and I'd beaten everyone at some point. And so you get to this point where it's a little bit hard to find those new challenges and new things to chase. And the only one really left for me was the Olympic Games. So I sort of had to look to 2015 and think, I've got to win 3 world titles. That's sort of the only thing I can focus on at the moment. And then, leading into that World Championships, I started having some injury troubles and ended up having to have a shoulder reconstruction. about 12 months out from the Olympic Games and right before the World Champs. So I had to pull out of the World Champs, and sort of most people started telling me, you won't be ready for the Olympic Games. It's too close. You're going to have to sort of refocus on something else. So that was pretty shattering for me, but I was kind of determined to get to the Olympic Games. I kind of knew it wouldn't be in the capacity that I wanted to be, and that sort of shattered a lot of dreams for me in that way. But I just had to refocus and become determined on just making it to that second Olympic Games in a lot of ways, which is a bit of a reality check and not what you want. But sometimes you've just got to compromise with those things.
Yeah, injury and preparation are definitely a part of sport, and dealing with a few of those in the last couple of years, so I can understand that. You prompted me there when you spoke about you've beaten everyone and competed with everyone over the years. Did you ever have one specific rival? I mean, the other Australian swimmer, who was it? Mac Horton is going with the moment. He's got the rivalry he's got the rivalry going with the Chinese swimmer at the in the last couple of years. And did you ever have
Sun Yang.
Sun Yang. Did you ever have a rival that you just really wanted to beat, that you grew up competing with, and that you'd love to hate or you'd love to compete against?
Probably more than a specific person. I really wanted to beat Americans all the time. I'm not sure the exact reason behind that. Just whenever there was an American in my race, I wanted to beat them. And particularly in the relay, I just wanted to beat them in the relay.
Yep.
The biggest rivalry we ever had, we had a bit of a confrontation type thing in a marshalling area between our relay team and the Russian relay team one year. And it got pretty fiery. And then we beat them in the race, and there's a picture of myself and one of the other guys turning to what looks like the crowd and flexing and screaming, and we're actually screaming at the Russians cop that or something.
I saw that probably last night, actually. When I was
probably something I can't say in the podcast, but
say whatever you want.
Yeah. That was probably the best in story, kind of within the marshalling area and stuff like that.
How does that go in the? You usually wherever you're competing, you're staying in the same hotels, or you see them around the areas wherever you are. Did you cross paths with any of them after that?
Oh, the Russian team generally are pretty icy anyway. They're these kind of big Ivan Drago looking dudes, and they don't give much away, so they're always pretty icy. So, and they don't speak much. They don't speak much English either. But I kind of love that stuff. I kind of wish there was more like that in swimming. Me and my coach always used to joke. So before you walk out at a World Champs or an Olympics, they have usually these big video screens that kind of open, and athletes will walk out one at a time or something like that. And we used to joke, imagine if these screens open and you just got a guy by the scruff of the neck punching on in front of 20 million people on TV or something. How sick would that be for swimming? Yeah, swimming can get pretty dry sometimes. I'd just like to see something spice it up a bit.
Yeah, the weigh-ins backstage at the UFC or something like that, where there's a bit of, they got to separate them. There's a bit of biff.
Yeah.
Maybe we need to start bringing that back in. That'll be nice.
Yeah, imagine if they put a camera pan to the marshalling area, and Mac Horton's got Sun Yang in a headlock or something before the 400 freestyle.
It'd be brilliant. I would definitely tune in for that.
Did you chat to Mac Horton at all about during that period? There was obviously got pretty intense, where it felt like an entire country was just berating Mac Horton over anything that he did, and I think his social media was just, you'd go on it. I remember going on it during some of the peak of it, and some of the comments, hilarious. Some of them were your dad is a dog, or you're all these ones that sort of things that were probably English translations that didn't really make much sense. They're kind of funny, but at the same time, being him, I think it would be quite intense to have this entire barrage of abuse coming at once.
Yeah, luckily the Chinese were so shit at banter, but so I don't think it affected him too much. But it's weird. I was speaking to him at the time. I was over there with him at the Olympics. He actually dealt with it really well. It was really calm. I think, I think it's the next generation of not just athletes, it's the next generation of people that they grew up with social media and they're used to it, and they kind of take the highs and the lows with social media. Whereas for me, like, I didn't get Facebook until I was like 18. Like, that's not really when it came through. So when I used to cop criticism on social media, it was something new. And I didn't really, understand that it was just some hack that would never say it to you in person that was given an outlet. Whereas Mac was cruisy, man. Like, he barely got affected by it. And I just was so surprised by it. He even had people like, I think someone might have kidnapped his dog or something back in Melbourne. They ended up having to have like police guard on their house. It was insane.
Yeah, that's a bit.
That's
far.
intense.
As like someone could be a keyboard warrior, but stealing a dog's a bit much.
Well, I think as well, like, what are your thoughts on the scenario itself? Because the reality was he did cheat, right? Like, I mean, we might cop it now as well. But it's probably like Chinese bots out there waiting for the comments to come through, and then we're just going to get barraged.
Don't go too hard here, please.
But what are your thoughts on the whole scenario? Because I mean, when something happens and it's factual, like, it's like, well, you're just speaking the truth, right?
Yeah, look, I think the thing for Mac was, and I've had it in my own career as well, like, I've raced people that have tested positive to different things and been allowed to race. More so than a Mac versus Sun Yang, it's a Mac versus the organisation versus the sport versus FINA, who is the governing body for swimming. Because why are FINA, a governing body, allowing people to race when they've had a positive test? So I saw it more so, as Mac being let down and swimmers being let down by a governing body. Sun Yang personally, regardless of what he'd done, he doesn't make the decision whether he's allowed to stand on the blocks and race or not. He doesn't really have a say in that. It's the governing body who's both let down Mac, but other swimmers as well. The person that has the world record in my events has tested positive for performance enhancing drugs at different times, and these things kind of get swept under the carpet a bit quite often. What Mac did was just brought it to light in quite prominent arena.
Definitely. I want to now fast forward. We'll talk about your post-career in a second. I know Daniel's got some questions on that, but I just want to fast forward to 2019, your actual decision just to retire. Was that something that you've been thinking about for quite a while? How did you go about it? And yeah, just talk us through kind of that mindset leading up to that.
Yeah, so in 2018 was the Commonwealth Games in Australia. So that was the first time for me that a lot of my family and friends got to see me race in real life, not on TV. And I kind of knew at the time that was probably the last time I was ever going to race. Not because I was past it physically or anything like that, just it felt like the right time, and doing it in front of, my home crowd. But it took me probably 6 to 9 months to announce my retirement, because I really wanted to let it settle in and make sure that it was right. I didn't want to sort of come out and announce my retirement and then announce, a month later that I was coming back to swimming.
Johnny Farnham, come back to him.
Yeah, that's it. So for me personally, it was probably a mental thing. Like, I was just sick of getting up and training every morning. Swimming is a weird sport in that you spend so much time in your own head. You've got your head underwater. Your coach can walk along the side of the pool, but you can't really hear him. When you spend, for me, if you go back to my junior career as well, when you spend the best part of, say, 15 years with 4 hours a day with your head underwater, not being able to speak to anyone, it's definitely got a lifespan on it.
Do you think that now the Olympics coming up, hopefully, if everything goes well, there's been some talk about maybe not, but what's the difference in prep that some of these guys might have to have changed? Obviously the whole thing is leading into the peak performance for a specific period of time. And then that gets pushed out a year and then gets pushed out to who knows when, right? Like saying July, but who knows what. How much do you think that would affect these guys?
Yeah, it's bedlam. Like, not only from a coaching perspective, when you're trying to manage workload and kind of plan around that year. Mentally, it's like I just couldn't imagine like how hard that would be. Like it'd be like saying, you know, two AFL teams are in the grand final in a month's time. You'd be preparing for it, you know, as if it's a grand final. You've trained a whole year for it, and then to take that away and move it, and to have so much uncertainty, it's really hard. And for most of these swimmers, they kind of make a living off something like an Olympic Games. It's the only time you get that huge amount of exposure and sponsors and stuff like that. So they probably would have had a year with A, no racing, B, a lack of ability to train, and C, no income. So it's a triple whammy in that way.
Are you going to be involved at all at any level, of just supporting on the sidelines, watching on TV? Is there anything you got planned on that side?
Yeah, I'm not too sure. There's a few things in the works for the last when it was meant to happen last year, but I don't know. Everything's just up in the air now. Like, you know, will people be able to go over? Will they have to broadcast from back in Australia? It's just so much uncertainty around it. And when you look at like some of the main countries that are competing, like America, who are just in complete disarray, it's kind of hard to see how it can go ahead in only a couple of months' time.
Yeah, right.
It'd be very, very interesting to see what happens there, mate.
Yes, crazy. Now, mate, let's talk about post-career, because you've had a bunch of stuff on, especially the last year has been. Everyone was sitting at home, doing nothing during COVID, and you decided to start a business and then go on reality TV. So let's talk about those things. Firstly, you've got a new business you started, Habitual, right? Talk to us about it.
Got the t-shirt on.
Yeah, you're repping it. It's good to see.
Got the t-shirt.
Yeah, lovely. So you're either the smartest man alive or the luckiest man alive with that starting right at the start of COVID. Because if all the industries that boomed during this period of time, home gym fit outs would have been at the peak of existence, surely.
Yeah. So as all my teachers throughout my illustrious schooling career will tell you, it's definitely not the smartest man alive. I think it was an idea that was conceived before COVID, and a couple of my business partners and I started talking about like doing a gym equipment on like a subscription service, like a Netflix or a Stan or something like that. So you pay per week and you get your gym equipment for a given period. Just because I found, so I personally do a range of different sort of trainings. I do some CrossFit, I do some powerlifting, I do some general conditioning and stuff like that. But I wanted something more accessible. You know, when you got to go to the gym or you got to go out of your house, you always find an excuse not to do it. So we kind of came up with the idea. We're playing around with it, and all of a sudden COVID hits, and we're like, man, we got to get to market. Like we got to go hard, we got to go fast. And so from the day we kind of hit the go button to launching on national TV, about a 6 weeks period to set up supply chains, to set up businesses, to set up websites, marketing. Like this whole business was kind of conceived and set up in 6 weeks. So we're able to get to market during lockdown. And then luckily for us, unluckily for you guys, Melbourne just kept getting locked down. Yeah. So we just kept pumping the marketing down to you guys down there. And Melbourne people were just eating it up.
Well, it's crazy because during that period of time, like we got a gym across the road here, and I borrowed some stuff from them and put it at the office when I was allowed to come into the office, which was then became more rare. But if you went onto like Facebook Marketplace or Gumtree or something and wanted to buy, 20 kilo dumbbells, it was like $300.
You couldn't get anything from any other shop though.
You couldn't buy them anywhere. They were out of stock, and like they'd never seen this spike before the industry.
I think it was a 6 month wait for a bench press bench from like Kmart or something. Like a $20 one. It was a 6 month wait.
It was like the toilet paper version, but for people wanting to work out at home.
Yeah,
going nuts. Obviously then you being able to get access and hit the go button as quick as you can meant that you could get that gear to people, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big part for us in terms of supply and manufacture was being able to produce quantities that kind of skipped us up the pecking order, so to speak. So, a lot of companies were trying to do similar things, but we were able to do it in large quantity. So we were able to get it to customers. And that was, it was the start of what's now, the business just keeps growing now. And I think one of the great things out of COVID is I feel like people have become a lot more health conscious, not just around COVID itself, but around health and fitness. Like, one of the great things in COVID was, you go to the local park and there'd be people out running and walking and playing footy, and people that usually wouldn't do that. And I think that for a lot of people, that's a lifestyle that they want to maintain now. They want to stay fit. They want to stay healthy. They have become more health conscious. So we're seeing a huge spike, not only in people buying home gym equipment, but smaller boutique and small classes gyms popping up all over the place to service those that new market.
Definitely. You've spoken about that you love to do CrossFit. You want to do powerlifting. You've clearly trained your whole life in an event. So for me, I'm looking at you going, you're clearly a competitor. You love to train. What next could come about of that? And as Daniel said, reality TV, but in a different way to what we've seen. The SAS show is completely different to doing The Bachelorette or something like that. Yeah. Talk us through that, the training involved for that, and kind of like what mentally motivated you to do that show, because from what it looks like on the outside, it's a bloody hard show to be a part of.
Yeah, so I've been asked over the years to do Dancing with the Stars, I'm a Celebrity, Survivor, all those shows. And I always said the same thing, like, reality TV is not for me, like, it's not something I envision myself doing. It doesn't really, like, none of those shows really require a skill set, right? If we're being honest, they are what they are. They're just pure entertainment. And then I got sent the reel for SAS back in about December or November 2019. And my manager said, there's this new concept coming to Australia. It's called SAS. Here's a couple of clips of some stuff they've done in the British one. And I watched these clips and it was like dudes backflipping out of helicopters, like running through the desert, like swimming in ice, like the most insane stuff. And I just messaged him back and said, "Nah, forget about it. Not interested. Looks ridiculous." And then I watched a couple of episodes of the British one, and it looked insane. But I started, like, the competitor in me started questioning, could I make it through that? Like, what would be my reaction if I had to backflip out of a helicopter, or what would be my reaction if I had to swim through ice and stuff like that? So I started kind of questioning myself. And one thing I noticed at the time was I started to train a little bit better, like in what I was doing, just because I was, like, challenging myself a little more. And then probably a week after that, I messaged him back and said, "Tell the producers I'm in. I've got to know if I can do this. I got to do it now." And that sort of started the whole process. And then I was probably, I amped up my training for it. I started doing a lot more running. I've never really been much of a runner in my life. And by the time I went on the show, I think I was running like 10K at 4:30 pace, which for me is pretty solid. So, I felt like I got myself to a point where I could compete on the show with some of the land-based athletes, and got myself in the best shape that I could.
It looked physically crazy, but I would imagine the whole point of that training for the SAS is similar to, I guess, Hell Week in the Marines and all that sort of stuff, is that the mental side, they want to try to break you down mentally and get you to a level. Did you find the mental side the hardest part?
Yeah, probably. I think physically, so I lost 11 kilos in 14 days.
Whoa, that's crazy.
Which is pretty intense. Yeah. And it's not really like, it wasn't weight that I had to lose either, really. Like I wasn't carrying much excess into the show, which if I was going to prepare for it again, or anybody out there that's doing the next season, put a layer of fat on you to get through the show, because you bloody need it. But yeah, so the show itself, I mean, I think when I signed up for it, I thought it can't be as bad as it looks. Like, it's not possible. They couldn't put you through that. And there must be showers, there must be beds, there must be like downtime. You must be able to sleep, you must be able to eat. But the reality of the show was there was no showers for 2 weeks. Like, I did not shower or clean once. There was no beds. We had these little like sort of sling hammock thing, and each night I'd lie down on the bed. I'd go straight through it because I was too heavy. So I weigh probably, I weigh generally around, say, 108, 109 kilos. And I reckon these beds were made to hold probably mid to high 90s. So there's no showers, no beds. Each night you probably sleep about 2 hours a night. So you get to, the lights would go off in the place about 11 o'clock at night, and you could maybe get an hour or two of sleep in before the temperature dropped well below zero. And then once it was dropped below zero, you'd wake up just shivering the rest of the night. Where we filmed was down near Thredbo, which is a sort of a ski town in New South Wales. So it was snowing most nights. And then, no food. Like, I was probably eating, if I had to have it a guess, I was probably eating about 1,000 calories a day, which in comparison to what I would do normally, I'd be somewhere between 4,000 and 5,000 calories a day. So it was just wild.
Wow. That's insane. I don't know. I'm not sure whether I could survive without eating food. The training I might like, but not the food.
No, we're tapping out of that immediately.
Yeah, tapping out of that. The one thing I want to know from the show was, obviously sometimes the show likes to beat up a rivalry or a bit of confrontation. Was that rivalry and confrontation between, it was probably more American Johnny for us, I think. Was that kind of real? Did it ever get serious in the bed in that kind of the room at night?
Yeah, it was full on. That was legit. So probably even more so than Merrick and Faras was Shannon Ponton and Faras. So Shannon was the coach off The Biggest Loser.
Yep.
And a couple of times Shannon called him out to a point where it was like, if you're a man, you'll like hand in your badge and go home. Like, just fully called him out, and I was like, whoa. But for us, I haven't been around a lot of creative types like that in my day, so I wasn't like too sure how to take Faras's personality at times. But he was a full-on guy, and I'm sure even he would admit it's bloody tough to live with someone like that for a couple of weeks in a confined space.
Was there anyone that surprised you on the show that you just didn't think might have not performed the way that they did? I think Merrick, in terms of like, he was a boss. Might have surprised a few people, although I think comedians have, are a bit crazy in some ways, so it's probably not that surprising to some. But was there anyone that surprised you with the physical and mental elements?
Yeah, I mean, like, Merrick's got the body of a prepubescent kid, and he was able to get right to the end of the show. Like, that was insane. Like, I looked at Merrick at the start, and I thought, Merrick's got probably like 5 days in him. And I think two of the first challenges we did, so he did a boxing challenge on the first day. He gets like KO'd by Mitch Johnson, which for anybody watching at home, they're like, what sort of a mismatch? You got an Australian fast bowler fighting this scrawny comedian. Like, how did they pair that up?
47, I think, at the time.
On the second day, we did this like kind of rugby ball challenge thing, and I got called out on a one-on-one like challenge with Merrick, who was running with this tire, and I tackled him and landed on him again. Huge mismatch, and apparently he cracked one of his ribs on like day 2 or 3 of the show. So Merrick was just like this, scrawny little comedian who just had the strongest willpower and determination.
Yeah.
And he just got through the whole show after getting KO'd and a cracked rib in the first 2 days.
Wow. maybe the KO at the start helped him out.
Knocked the brain a bit, but that's unbelievable by him.
Well, mate, we've got a segment. We're the pros and the cons, the podcast, the pros and the cons. So we're starting this as the first one we've done with you. So we're short fire questions, pros and cons we want from you, from a list of things we're going to throw at you. You're going to tell us if you like them or you don't like them, or just give us whatever you want. Doesn't matter.
Sometimes it may be good, sometimes it may be shit.
Weigh the good with the bad. It's time for pros and cons.
It's pros and cons time.
All right, so pro or con, number 1, pineapple on pizza.
Yeah, pro. I like it. I'm about it. Even on like a meat lovers or a chicken pizza. Throw a bit of pineapple on for that bit of sweetness.
We're the same, you and me. Can't put cooked fruit on pizza.
Cooked fruit. Isn't fruit meant to be nice, cold, juicy? Oh, that's right. That's yours, mate. We'll go with that. Pro for that. All right, next one is The Notebook, everyone's favourite movie.
Con. Boring. I don't like chick flicks.
Never seen it.
You've never seen it?
Never watched it. I don't want to watch that. I don't want to watch it. I don't want to watch
I need
it.
to get Em on to watch
Zero,
it. Come on,
zero
mate.
interest.
All
in
right,
watching
well, that's
it.
one pro, one con.
I'll give you a spoiler. They both die in the end.
All right, well, there you go. It's like Marley and Me. The dog dies. I don't need to watch it now.
Oh, mate, come on.
Well, it's true. I don't need to watch it. All right, Bitcoin.
Yeah, I guess pro. I think it's like giving people a chance to make money that probably wouldn't have that opportunity otherwise. But I mean, in terms of knowing about it myself, con, like I don't know shit.
I agree with you, mate. I do not know shit about it. I'll stay away from Bitcoin.
Staying away as well.
Although it's reached past 60,000, so some people are making plenty of money on it.
On that as well, did you hear about it? It was an NFL player who put half of his yearly salary into Bitcoin last year, and when it was at 27,000.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you'd know Elon Musk. He put 1.5 billion into it, and now it's already returned $1 billion. So, mate, he's the smartest man in the world.
Holy.
Yeah, not bad. All right, fourth one here. Some people love this store. Some people hate it. IKEA.
Oh, it's probably a con for me. Not the fact that the furniture's bad or anything. I just hate putting that shit together.
Completely agree.
It causes so many arguments. Like the amount of divorces that stuff would have caused. Far out.
I hate it. I even the store layout kills me. Like, don't force me to go a direction. I hate that.
Yes. Yeah. The arrows on the floor.
Yeah. You forced me to walk around for an hour just to eat your shitty meatballs at
the
end.
All right, I think we already know the answer to this one, but super suits in swimming.
Yeah, con. I mean, I would have liked to have been able to wear one at the time, but it shits me off that they kept the world records from when they were around.
What if we did a super suits
I know
league,
where you're going here.
a super suits league, and you can take whatever sups you want, whatever you can test positive to whatever you want, and you can jump in those. That'd be interesting. And punch-ons backstage before. There's your new swimming comp.
Yeah, I think the funny thing with sport and stuff like that, right, is at the end of the day, we only want to see freaks. Like, I don't switch the NFL on to watch some mediocre dudes run at a medium pace and hit like softly. We want to see freaks in sport. The problem is, you know, the lines are so blurred with supplements and stuff. Like, everyone says it's about keeping an even playing field. Well, here in Australia, I have access to all the best supplements in the world that are legal. Whereas my compatriot in Africa has access to nothing. So there's never going to be an even playing field anyway. And I wouldn't be surprised if in the future, not in the near future, but in the future, they just went open slather on SUPs, particularly for something like international sports. I mean, in a lot of those American sports like NFL and baseball and stuff, where they have a three-strike policy for steroids, and then you get stood down for like a couple of weeks. It's pretty much already open slather over there.
Yep, definitely. All right, I reckon we know the answer to this one too. CrossFit.
Yeah, pros, as long as you do it properly. You see a lot of absolute hacks. And I was surprised. Like, the thing about CrossFit is it's so goddamn hard. Like, just if anyone does a class, you realize how hard it is. I was amazed that so many normal people are willing to put their bodies through that 5 times a week for no real outcome. It's insane.
Yeah, it's amazing. Even say you hear about F45 and BodyFit now, that a lot of people get injured, and they're pretty much like, I know physios at our club are saying we're treating so many people from those gyms because they don't teach them the right technique. It's just come in, do the class and leave.
Yeah, it's keeping those physios, osteos, chiros, they're keeping them in business.
It's keeping them in business, yeah. It's keeping the F45s turning. So
yeah.
Tokyo Olympics.
Yeah, pro. Look, I hope it happens. I think the thing that I really hope is that if they do run it, they run it properly. They run it in person with at least some sort of capacity of crowd. I think if people were talking about at some stage running it remotely or something like that, or doing different sports in different places or some sort of online version of it, if they don't do this Olympics properly, it could end up being like the death of the Olympic Games, because it's already losing a lot of traction. Like there's so much competition for eyeballs these days with international sport. So I think if they're going to do it, they got to get it right. I just don't want them to half-ass it this year just so they can get it through.
Yep, not cheap to hold one either. All right, we got 3 to go here. These guys, I suppose, or family has been involved in the media a lot lately. The royal family.
Con, not interested. I think they're a dying breed.
Literally, Prince Philip died 7 years ago, I reckon. They're just carrying his corpse around to events. Have you seen him? I don't reckon he's alive anymore. He can't be. All right, Michael Phelps.
Yeah, pro. Probably one of the best athletes I've ever seen. To do what he did across so many different events. We may never see that again. So definitely pro, and stoked I got to race him.
Yep. Good one there. And last one is reality TV.
Ooh, tough one. I think probably pro, depending on, what sort of shows it is you're watching. I guess on one end of the spectrum, you got like Married at First Sight or Love Island. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you got crazy stuff like SAS. But I think SAS has changed the game now. I don't want to watch reality TV unless someone's being thrown out of a helicopter or tortured for 8 hours straight.
That sounds like the same thing as Married at First Sight, the torture part anyway. God, that show, that's poisonous, that show.
Mate, you watch Married at First Sight.
I do not watch it, but I do watch those. I agree. I think like we spoke about Survivor.
Yep.
We had Abby Holmes on, and like Survivor, those sort of shows are a bit more, I think, have some sort of physical element that actually requires skill. I think those are the ones that are the pros.
Yep, they're great to watch. Just before we let you go, mate, just one more for you. Just for any young kid out there who's listening to our podcast, maybe a teenager playing sport and upcoming through that kind of social media age, what advice would you give them that you kind of wish you had at that age that you then, you've spoken a little bit about things that you've learnt, but what advice would you give for a young 17, 18-year-old kid coming through, the impact that professionalism and media could have on them?
Yeah, don't read comments on social media. Particularly the worst comment sections in the world are when a news outlet posts an article about you and the comments that come up under that article. That is the worst possible thing for your mindset you can ever look at. So don't read that stuff, and just take a second to think about when you see criticism from someone, in an armchair at home, take a minute to think about what's going on in their life for them to be writing that.
Yep.
And probably the one piece of advice I always took from it, so I always used to sit down and think, who are the people in my life whose opinions I care about, who I respect enough to take on board their opinions? And outside of that, I just don't listen to it. I kind of laugh it off, and that's the way you got to be. Keep your circle of people that you respect and trust small, and respect their opinions. And outside of that, cruise on.
Yep.
Love that, great advice. Really good advice, mate. Thank you so much for coming on. How can we find you? Habitual, tell us where we can go to look it up, and where we can find you on everything and what's going on.
Yeah, so Habitual Equipment on Instagram, Facebook. If you Google Habitual Equipment, we'll come up straight away. If you're after anything, we've got a lot of stuff in stock, which is pretty rare again, even now. So yeah, hit us up.
Awesome, man. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you so much, Matt.
Thanks, lads.
Well, we've been getting some feedback lately about us wrapping up episodes that just finished in people's ears. For those who don't know, we have talked to them however minute.
What a great episode, mate.
We always say it. We know it was a fucking great episode. Everyone's just listened to it.
What a great
episode. We don't need to wrap up
mate.
We like the feedback. It was my brother called me and said, stop fucking saying how good the episode was that we just listened to.
Well, I'd rather that than say, yeah, what a piss poor performance that was.
Maybe we just don't even need to talk about how good or bad the episode was, and we just say thanks for listening.
Well, you know what, mate? When you have good things in life, you got to appreciate them. It's called gratification.
We're trying not to wrap them up again that much, though.
So we want gratification, mate. We've had great guests.
At least we don't wrap up, back over what they just heard.
No, exactly.
For those of you who don't know how we record the app, we will record an app and then we might sit around for a while and talk, and then we record the outros that happen sometimes a little while after we've actually done it. So for us, it was the past.
Yes,
in a sense, even if it was 20 minutes ago, whatever it was. Whereas for you guys in your ears, it was just now.
Yes.
Thanks for listening, guys. It was a great episode.
It was. See, there you go. It was a great episode. I told you.
Thanks to James for coming on.
Thank you very much. He was a great guest.
Tune in on YouTube if you're not already, and make sure you are a subscriber on there, as well as subscribing on either Apple or Spotify.
Yep.
Or any of the other ones.
Leave us a rating, please. We love 5-star ratings. We appreciate them all, and we love some feedback. So give us some positive feedback. And if you don't like what we've done, then DM Daniel personally.
You can do that.
Thank you. Not me.
Thanks to JBL and Colonial for sponsoring the podcast again. The Reflect Mini NC is the headphone that you need to check out. The in-ear headphones. Make sure you use the code TPATC25. Really easy to remember, TPATC25, David.
Yep. And get ready for another great episode. Fantastic next week.
What a great episode, David. Thank you for everyone listening in. Tune in next week. You.